Greetings all, welcome to another episode of Quan Listener. I am a very sleepy David. As I mentioned a few episodes ago, I'm off to a few trips upcoming, and I thought that this would be a wonderful time to talk about one of my favorite pieces that I'll be doing on one of those trips. Specifically, Couperin's Leçons des ténèbres. I'm just going to talk about it a little bit briefly. I don't want to go on and on. I want to introduce this piece on purely musical grounds, just because I don't want people to think that if they don't quite get the content, they can't enjoy it. This will be, I think, the 5th time I've played it, and it comes in a set of 3. The first 2 lessons are for soprano and continuo, the continuo section traditionally being an organ and a viola da gamba, whereas the third is the same format except it's 2 sopranos. So oftentimes when you see it in concert, you'll see one soprano do one lesson, another soprano do the second one, and then both of them doing the third. These are pieces that have been played during ténèbres services. So in other words, we're talking Holy Week, late Lent going to Good Friday. They're incredibly delicate pieces. I think part of it's because of the scoring, but also just because of the size of them. Look at the Bach Passions, St. John, St. Matthew. Massive works for a very large ensemble. Occasionally those get pared down to small ensembles, but overall they are pretty large works and span enormous material. And while the Couperin has a lot of dimensions to it emotionally, it always keeps, of course, within this very simple perspective of a voice or 2 and the accompaniment underneath it. And what I think is so interesting about these pieces is how diverse Couperin is. Usage of instrumentation, with his usage of voices, usage of ornaments. As you can see on this beautifully engraved page, we have the 3 voices. Underneath you have the bass line. Above the bass line you'll see these numbers listed over it. It's essentially shorthand for what chord is being played at any particular time. Very simply put, the more numbers that you'll find, the more complex, the more potentially dissonant that chord is going to be. That is extraordinarily simplified. Couperin is absolute genius in terms of his ability to make every individual detail count. So every chord has a certain kind of flavor to it. Every single voice leading has a certain kind of flavor to it. A little construction going on outside. And therefore you have this amazing miniaturized feel. So it's almost like a passion, but imagine it being done on a very small size of paper, something like this, as opposed to the giant canvas that most passion type pieces are done on. And because of its lighter texture, it's almost the equivalent of having it done on watercolor. Part of that is due to how French it is. I wasn't really going to explain this very much, but I might as well now while I'm at it. Basically at the time of these composers, Bach included, as well as Couperin, Vivaldi, all of these, you very much have styles that are divided into their nationalities. At the time that these pieces were being written, you had these very strong ideas about French music and Italian music. This may be a bit of an extreme comparison, but it's almost on the same level as comparing New York style pizza and Chicago deep dish. Each party thinks that theirs is significantly better than the other. They're also extremely different. It would be hard to say necessarily that one particular music style is like deep dish versus actual New York style, so it would probably be easier to compare with, say, desserts. And even then, that's going to be relatively simplistic. Basically, if you look at Italian music at this time, you've got this very dark, rich, pretty straightforward construction. Think Vivaldi. Compare that with French music of this time, and a lot of people will point to the architecture and how many frills there would be, especially not just the architecture, but also the painting and the fashion at that time. You have all these ornaments within, almost as important stylistically as the actual structure. So whereas Italian music might be the very well-crafted chocolate bar, French music is your meringue, or some sort like that. This is extraordinarily simplistic to describe both of these styles that way. There are many, many, many exceptions. Leçons des ténèbres is essentially quintessential French vocal style. Highly ornamented melodies, bass line underneath it that contains many colorful harmonies. And there's a certain French restraint about it. Not to say that it's not passionate, because it certainly has moments of passion. but the music is written in such a way so that it really can speak for itself. Italian music at this time, you have a lot of interpretive leeway that you can take in terms of ornaments, in terms of dynamics. French music is about the craft of the composition from its conception. Italian music is almost there to show off the ability of the performer to work with the piece of music that they have. In the end, you have two very different kinds of styles. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that pieces like Leçons de ténèbres get a lot of respect, is because the composer took so much care to put every single detail in there. You don't really have to mess with it much, because it already has all the complexity that you would need from it. And especially from a scholarly perspective, where we're trying to, so to speak, resurrect some of these much older pieces, there's a certain satisfaction in looking at pieces like the Leçons, which have every detail there, and we can get a much more vivid picture of what musicians of that time were doing. Again, this is nothing against Italian music, much more oral tradition and much more performance-based. So it's not that it didn't have those kind of details that French music has, it's just that we don't have them in writing in the same way, or at least not to as extent as French music does. There are many, many recordings of these pieces that have been done. You really look on Spotify, you can look on YouTube, you'll probably be able to find a fair amount of options. Just go out, hunt out your own version, hunt out your own recording that you prefer. I'll also say that they are short. So if you're looking for something that you can pretty easily, unlike say the Shostakovich 4 that we did a few weeks ago, that may have been a little ambitious. This is nice and compact. I highly, highly encourage you to give them a listen. In any case, I hope to be back making video maybe sometime next week when I'm out. Can't promise that's going to happen. If you do see another video next week, it will be from North Carolina. If not, it might be a few weeks. Till then, please keep sharing these videos with your friends. I'm more than aware that most of the people watching these are people that I know personally. But please, by all means, feel free to share these with your studios, with your students, whether they be of whatever ages. Either way, go out, have a listen. I'll see you soon.